Dozens of hearses await the remains of crash victims returning to the Netherlands from Ukraine. Florida Senator Marco Rubio leads a discussion on the breakdown of the American family. Muslim Palestinians fleeing violence in Gaza find refuge in a Greek Orthodox church. And new leadership for the Veterans Affairs Department? This vet and business executive is eager to serve. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, July 23rd, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. Looking at your news now, a healthy economy is essentially linked with healthy families and healthy communities. In a major policy speech today, Florida Senator Marco Rubio makes that connection. Our Jason Calvi was there, and he reports tonight from the Capitol. Jason?
Brian, Senator Rubio's proposal aims to get people out of poverty, and he says a key way to do that is to strengthen marriage. In his talk today, he also waded into some hot topics, including abortion and same-sex marriage.
Baptists and Catholics unite today to host Senator Rubio here at Catholic University of America.
Over 20% of children raised without both parents live in poverty long-term, compared with just 2% of those raised in intact families. But having an active father makes children 98% more likely to graduate from college and complete the first step of the success sequence.
So to raise people out of poverty, the senator says the government can't ignore the problem of the breakdown of the family. To improve it and help get people out of poverty, Rubio says the country should promote marriage, technical training, online schooling, and allowing parents to choose where to send their kids.
They do not have the financial means to send their kids to schools, private or religious schools, and so the government gives them no option other than sending their children to failing schools.
He also discussed gay marriage's impact on society.
Thousands of years of human history have shown that the ideal setting for children to grow up is with a mother and a father committed to one another. And just as states have the right to redefine marriage to include same-sex marriage, they also have a right to continue to define it as one man and one woman. But now all across this country we have judges overturning state laws.
And one panelist after the talk agreed that the breakdown of traditional marriage should be an important issue for all Americans.
Well, I think many people assume that marriage is simply expanding. I think instead that the definition of marriage is being stretched to the point where it is breaking. And so the consequence is probably going to be fewer marriages and a decline in a marriage culture. That's something that all Americans, even those who don't share religious faith, ought to be concerned about.
And Senator Rubio proposed increasing the child tax credit. He also said it's the states who should handle the money to help fight poverty. He also touched upon abortion, saying that the unborn child should be welcomed. And he said that we should do more to help women in crisis pregnancies. Brian, will be having an exclusive one-on-one with Senator Rubio coming up.
All right, thank you. Jason Calvi at Capitol Hill. We look forward to that. Meanwhile, Jennifer Marshall, Vice President for the Institute of Family, Community and Opportunity at the Heritage Foundation, is with us. You've just released the Index of Culture and Opportunity. What family-related trends are we seeing in America now?
Well, what we're doing with this index is focusing on the fact that you've got to look at social and economic trends if we're going to talk about opening the path to opportunity for all Americans. And so we looked at the divorce rate, the marriage rate, the fertility rate, unwed childbearing, and sadly, some of those things are going in the wrong direction. Unwed childbearing is one. 4 out of 10 children today are born outside of marriage. And that casts a long shadow down the course of their life when it comes to opportunity.
And fewer people are getting married. What impact is that having on our society?
Well, a significant one. We're changing our respect for marriage, and it's a lot more confusing in the wake of the sexual revolution and the feminist movement.
But we also see dropping rates in abortion and violent crime. Are you encouraged by that?
I am encouraged, and that's part of the reason we put this index out, is because we can have change in these indicators of opportunity in America. And what we see on the abortion rate, on the violent crime rate, is what we can see on other indicators if we focus policy attention and community leadership on these issues.
Does the research that went into this report indicate at all why these trends are occurring?
Well, you know, what we did was to invite commentators, experts from around the country, from think tanks and universities and the media, to comment on the trend lines and to illuminate that a little bit. And so we have a good discussion, and it's actually a purpose of inviting more discussion among Americans about these key indicators.
So how would you tie then these trends with our culture and the opportunity for growth within our society?
Well, one thing is that we've got to be looking at the stability of the American family centered on marriage if we want to see economic vitality and our leadership on the world stage. And that's what we're doing with the Index of Culture and Opportunity at the Heritage Foundation.
But it seems like we've lost that battle.
No, by no means. This is part of why we thought it was important to do a tool like this, was so that we could focus attention year by year to monitor how we're doing and to turn the tide. You know, we have not given up on the pro-life fight, and we have seen results in the abortion rate. We focused energy on the violent crime rate, and that has come down. So we can do that same thing if we focus on some of these other issues as well.
How do you think or hope that the material in this report will be used constructively?
I hope that policymakers will look at it, and I also hope that people in communities will look at it and share this information with their neighbors in town halls and so on. We mean it to bring about policy action and civil society action, and it's that kind of focused attention that can make a difference for our culture of opportunity.
Some very good information in there. I'd encourage you to read it if you can. Jennifer Marshall, thanks for joining us from the Heritage Foundation.
Thanks for having me.
Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. It is a somber day as the remains of victims from the downed Malaysian airline Flight 17 arrive in the Netherlands. The bodies in wooden caskets were unloaded respectfully from military planes to waiting hearses. A grieving nation holds a moment of silence honoring those killed in the crash. Of the 298 people who died when the plane was shot down over Ukraine last week, 193 were Dutch citizens. Dutch officials say the bodies will be taken to a military facility for forensic testing. Meanwhile, Dutch investigators have now been allowed at the crash site in eastern Ukraine, but they're concerned about the condition of the downed plane and this compromised scene. In fact, the monitoring team has noticed changes in the condition of the debris. There's still not been a full-scale investigation of the site. These delays and the haphazard treatment of the site has led to calls for sanctions against Russia. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is now in Israel trying to help ease tensions there. At least 7 people were killed in Gaza today from drone strikes and shellings by Israeli tanks. The number of people who have been forced to seek shelter has increased nearly 6-fold since the start of Israel's ground operation in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli tanks continue to fire shells and mortars from the Israeli side of the border. The recent clash between Israel and the Islamic militant group Hamas has killed at least 650 Palestinians. The Israeli military said 2 more soldiers were killed in the fighting. That raises their death toll now to 29. So as the conflict escalates, some displaced Muslim Palestinians are taking refuge in a Greek Orthodox church in Gaza City. The Greek Orthodox Archbishop there says he and his neighbors are helping with the very basics.
Of course, these people, they don't have nothing. They get out from their houses with their clothes, just to carry their children, their babies. So they arrived in the church, and now we try, together with my neighbors, to help as much as we can.
A United Nations relief agency serving that region says more than 100,000 Palestinians, around 6% of the entire population of Gaza, are now seeking refuge in schools, churches, and other buildings set up as emergency shelters. The Vatican's representative to the UN in Geneva is calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Archbishop Silvano Tomasi delivered a statement on the Israeli-Hamas conflict during a special session of the UN's Human Rights Council today. He says the way to the future includes recognizing our common humanity. Well, when and whether the legal definition of marriage will change in Colorado is still being debated there today. A federal judge is likely to declare a voter-approved ban on so-called same-sex marriage unconstitutional. But it's not the end of the story. Colorado's Attorney General wants the ruling stayed until the U.S. Supreme Court decides the issue. Without that stay, county clerks could now begin issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. A hearing in the House today seeks answers in the case of Sudanese Christian Meriam Ibrahim. Her death sentence for marrying a Christian was overturned, but the 27-year-old remains stuck in Sudan. Her father was a Muslim, but she married a Christian who has dual citizenship, including an American citizenship. She endured prison while pregnant and gave birth shortly before her death. Her death sentence, was overturned. Since her release, the family found refuge in the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum. They are now waiting for permission to fly to the U.S. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is vice chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. You testified before this congressional committee today. Now, you're a devout Muslim. You testified on behalf, I guess, of Christians and Muslims who are in this situation in the Sudan and in other places. Give us a couple of examples of this kind of oppression.
Well, I think Meriam's case is emblematic not only of Sudan, but we see this across many of the theocratic regimes such as Iran or in Afghanistan or Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, or like Raif Badawi, so many different cases. And we have Prisoners of Conscience program in which we've used these cases from our commission in a bipartisan fashion to bring to light the fact that countries that repress religious freedom will also be less secure, more unstable, less economically prosperous, and also as go their minorities. And within the majority also, I can tell you as a Sunni Muslim, that many of the minority voices within the majority are signs of religious freedom problems that exist in many of these countries.
There's a lot of confusion among Americans about this. You know, we understand that her death sentence was apparently because she chose to live a Christian life. Now, her father was Muslim, her mother was Christian, she married a Christian. What does Islam really teach about this?
Well, you know, we need to talk about which Islam is it. The Islam of my family, that we escaped persecution in Syria, my parents left in the mid-60s, or the Islam of the Iranian theocrats, the Islamists of the Bashir regime in Sudan, or that of the Saudi implementation of Sharia. You know, this is the battle going on within the House of Islam, if you will. And I think America, as we see, for example, with ISIS in Iraq, they're forcing Christians to leave their faith or leave Mosul. This is a vacuum that's happening where the radicals, the militants of our faith community are filling that in. And into that space, we should put in the advocacy for religious freedom for all. And that's what we hope the U.S. foreign policy should become.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, because so many of us just lump Islam together, and you made that very clear that we shouldn't be doing that.
And many Muslims are some of the primary targets. Muslims in prison, the majority are Muslims who choose a path against the draconian implementation or interpretation of Sharia that the government poses, and they are perceived to be apostates because they don't follow the Wahhabist or the Islamist version that the government pushes.
Well, the U.S., of course, very interested in this case because Miriam's husband is an American citizen. But are there other women that are going through this that you are aware of?
There's, in Sudan, for example, in the last 3 years, over 170 cases of people convicted or put in prison, often by family members who don't want them marrying outside the faith or outside the tribe, and they're used to settle scores, but the government also uses it to put forth in Sudan their 1991 Charter of Public Decency, which is a license to repress their people. And we need to hold governments accountable to the International Declaration of Human Rights. And the URFA statute of '98, the International Religious Freedom Act, basically says that we can tie, Sudan is a designated now CPC country of particular concern. And if we tie to that what our statute says, they should suffer some sanctions, and we hope that's what this hearing today would bring to light.
Very enlightening. The Vice Chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, thank you so much for clearing that up for us.
Appreciate it, Brian. Thank you.
Coming up, a familiar face. Former Senator Bob Dole spent years on Capitol Hill. Find out why he returned today. And a new memorial takes shape, honoring the valor of permanently disabled veterans. On Wednesday, July 23rd, you're watching EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. We go back to Capitol Hill now, where our Jason Calvi is one-on-one with Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Jason?
Thanks, Brian. Senator Rubio, today in your address, you talked about how states have the right to redefine marriage, but you yourself support traditional marriage. How do you reconcile those two views?
Well, states have always regulated marriage and the laws, and so people have a right to go to their state legislature and say, we want you to change that law. Those of us who support the traditional definition of marriage have the same right, and that shouldn't be overturned by judges. And even more importantly, there's a growing intolerance in America towards those who hold the views I have towards traditional marriage. We're accused of being bigots and haters, and that's unfair, because my motivation for supporting traditional marriage has nothing to do with a desire to discriminate against anyone. It's the desire to continue to enshrine and elevate in our laws an institution, the marriage of one man and one woman, that's proven to be very beneficial to our country and our society.
How do you, in this situation where you have people in different states having, some have gay marriage, some don't, how do you make sense of not having two countries here in the United States?
Well, states now have different marriage laws. The age you can get married, you know, whether if you're 16 and you need parental permission to do it, or maybe in some states it's 17. Again, I don't agree for them changing the laws, but they have a right to do it. What I disagree with is there are states like Florida where the voters have defined marriage as one man and one woman, have placed that in our state constitution, and now you have a judge throwing out the will of voters. If in fact the supporters of redefining marriage feel so strongly about it, they have a right to go to the legislature and try to pass a law. What they shouldn't be doing is trying to use the courts for that purpose, and they shouldn't be demonizing people who disagree with them on that point.
So today you talked about ways to improve the economy, strengthening marriage. One of the things you said was to increase the child tax credit by about $1,000, but doing so may put people right over the poverty line, no longer qualifying then for some federal poverty relief assistance. What do you make of that?
Well, a couple points. First of all, we want to continue to incentivize work, and you have to view that through the lens of everything we're proposing, which includes more educational opportunities for people that are stuck in lower paying jobs, that the only way they're ever going to get a better job is by acquiring higher education. Right now, many of those people don't have access to it. It costs too much money. It's too hard to access. They have to work full-time and raise a family. So you have to view it in its total sum. But what we do want to do is make it easier for families that are trying to raise children to bear the cost of that.
Senator Rubio, you said about Hillary Clinton that she's a 20th century candidate. You said that this week. Are you a 21st century candidate? Are you going to run this in 2016?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to run in 2016, whether it's for the Senate or the presidency. That's a decision I'll have to pray and think about over the next few months, and obviously talk to my family and decide where I can best further the agenda that I believe in for rescuing the American dream. I do think that she suffers from a liability that many in the left suffer from, and that is they want to continue to invest in broken, antiquated ideas that didn't even work that well in the 20th century. Higher education is a perfect example. School choice is another example. They want to continue to tie us up with 20th century institutions that just don't work very well anymore.
Senator Rubio, thank you very much. Senator Rubio, Florida, here at the Capitol. Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Brian, back to you.
All right, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Senator Rubio. A fairly new face on Capitol Hill, but earlier today, a familiar older face returned to Capitol Hill after a long absence. 91-year-old former Senator Bob Dole joined with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee voting on a UN treaty to protect people with disabilities. Dole, who was disabled fighting in World War II, is a strong backer of this measure.
This is not a Republican or a Democrat treaty. It's not liberal or conservative. As has already been said, it's just the right thing to do. And you know, right now it's an uphill fight.
So far, 146 countries have signed the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Critics are concerned the treaty could override some U.S. laws. 58 million Americans have disabilities. There are many more worldwide. The troubled Department of Veterans Affairs is on a fast track to new leadership tonight. Retired Procter & Gamble Chairman Robert McDonald's nomination is approved today by a Senate panel after just one day of questioning. Some VA medical centers are under scrutiny for long treatment delays that may have cost veterans lives. McDonald, who was a captain in the Army's 82nd Airborne, told the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee he is ready for the challenges ahead.
The seriousness of this moment demands action, and if confirmed, I pledge to the committee and to our nation's veterans to take a series of immediate actions over the first 90 days to deliver the needed reforms our veterans deserve. I will put the veteran at the center of everything that we do, consistent with our mission.
McDonald says there is no higher calling for him right now than this opportunity to make a difference in the lives of veterans. His nomination must still be confirmed by the full Senate. Well, Washington's newest Veterans Memorial will be unveiled in October, honoring lives lived with the scars of war. Tonight, Catherine Elliott tours the construction site near the National Mall.
EVAH. Space.
Construction workers can't leave any detail to chance, carefully proofreading the quotations that will adorn the walls of Washington's newest memorial. 16 years after it was conceived, the American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial is less than 3 months from being formally dedicated.
So the flame floats on top of the water.
Barry Owenby oversees the memorial's construction. He says the memorial is unique in that it honors disabled veterans no longer living and those still with us.
What we're trying to convey to our citizens is the sacrifices that disabled veterans have made, and those disabled veterans go all the way back to the Revolution.
The memorial will feature 48 laminated glass panels that tell the stories of soldiers. 4 bronze statues reflect the emotion of becoming disabled. A reflecting pool and star-shaped fountain sit at the heart of the memorial, which has a clear line of sight to the U.S. Capitol.
The foundation also wanted the Congress to be able to see this memorial, to see the flame and the star fountain, and realize that there's a cost, a human cost, when you send our troops in harm's way.
The cost to design and build the memorial is estimated at more than $81 million, all paid for by private donations. In Washington, Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, can online emergency room check-ins speed up urgent care? And a story that may amaze you. Our Mark Irons jumps into the latest maze craze. Thank you for joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick, and we know more tonight about the Pope's pilgrimage to Korea next month, including a visit with an international pop star. The Holy Father will meet with 20 Asian young people during Asian Youth Day 2014. Korean pop star Boa will join the luncheon as an honorary ambassador. The mid-August trip marks the first time in 25 years a Pope has visited the Korean Peninsula. EWTN News Nightly's Alan Holdren, that's not him, is traveling with Pope Francis, providing in-depth coverage. Well, a Chinese food safety scandal is spreading to fast food restaurants now in Japan. Local regulators have suspended the operations of Shanghai Husai Food. The government intervened after a Chinese broadcaster aired footage of workers using their bare hands to process expired meat. They were even using meat that had fallen on the floor. McDonald's and other fast food chains in Japan have apologized to customers, and they have stopped ordering meat from that company. A major fruit recall is hitting U.S. grocery stores. Shoppers at Costco, Trader Joe's, Walmart, and Kroger are warned to avoid fruits with pits for a while, things like peaches, plums, and nectarines, at risk of listeria contamination from a packing company in California. Food stores say they're taking the precaution, although no one has reported getting sick from contaminated fruit at this point. Emergency room lines may get shorter as some hospitals adopt online ER check-in systems. The online ER appointments aren't intended for patients with high-risk emergencies, like chest pain or breathing trouble. But for people with things like sprained ankles or fevers, it can help reduce their wait time in the ER. Patients checking in online explain the reason for their ER visit. They check a box that says treatment can wait, and critics say the system isn't necessarily cost-effective, but hospitals hope to reduce chaos in their emergency rooms. A new email system aims to make it more difficult for the government to spy on us. It's called Darkmail, and it encrypts email content, shielding it from government spies. Now, Google's Gmail and some others already do this, but Darkmail takes an extra step of cloaking your email's metadata, which makes it harder to see who is sending and receiving emails. It's not totally NSA-proof, though, since the government can still target a person and then follow each email's trail. So, if the NSA is still trying to track you down, maybe you could lose them in this maze at the National Building Museum. Take a look at the new twist and turn on the typical maze design. It's amazing.
Well, it's a pretty big maze, as you'll see. So the design is really unique. Most outdoor mazes that you think of are, hedge mazes, corn mazes, they're traditional cube shapes, so you can't see anywhere. But here it's almost if you took an ice cream scoop and scooped out the inside. So once you get to the center, you kind of see where you came from, and you can see exactly where you're going, what the path is out. We teach about the built environment and interacting with the built environment, and this is a really neat way for our visitors to interact with that, see how things are built, look up. They're forced to kind of figure out the way in and out of the maze.
This is where we came off, and you come over here, and then you see the exit. Lots and lots of dead ends.
Well, I really like the maze because not only is it great for my brothers who are a bit younger, but also because I can go through it.
Victory! That was easy. You guys want to go again? Yeah. Yeah? All right, let's go.
Lots and lots of dead ends. Sounds like it's been a lot like my day today. I'm glad that our Mark Irons found his way out, and we're glad that you watched. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, watch again on EWTN's YouTube page. Thank you for watching. For all of us on here on EWTN News Nightly, good night, and may God bless you.